I was born in Rochester. I'm kidding.
I'm recording now, so we can go ahead and start.
Okay.
Well, we're back. Hey, Dad.
Hello, son.
How does this feel? Me talking to you like this?
How does it feel? Feels natural. Feels good. I like it.
Be like a normal conversation.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of my viewers know you, but tell them about yourself. why your story is important to people.
Well, my story is there's a lot to it. What, anything specific that you want to know?
Not really.
You just want to know, do you want to know where I was born and how it all?
I'll just go off and I'll just start off as so my first question, I'll just start off. I'll just say, when were you offered your first drink?
Okay, so what we're talking about then, starting out, we're talking about my recovery journey.
Right.
Correct? Okay. Actually, it's ironic that you're asking me this, because I had a conversation with a friend the other day about when I had my first drink and when I first was tipsy or intoxicated, I guess you could say. I probably did get intoxicated. It was in 7th grade. I was a 7th grader at Jackson Prep, so about 13 years old. Some friends of mine we were all out hanging out at my parents' house. And I remember going downstairs and going into the liquor cabinet and getting a bottle of Jack Daniels and sneaking it upstairs. And I can remember that feeling after I took those first couple of sips, thinking to myself how it made me feel and how I felt just relaxed, and I felt like I could just conquer the world, do anything. That's when that was the very first encounter with alcohol for me was then. So that was probably back in 1985, maybe.
And as you grew up and you always tell me, it only just got worse. And when you grow up and you're in that environment, especially when you're in high school and middle school during the 80s and 90s, it's kind of hard to turn away the substance. So when did you first realize that, maybe that I'm starting to get a little bit of a problem, or maybe I need to slow it down a little bit?
That's a good question. I drank in the early years, in the early teenage years, to, I think, for the most part, to fit in, to be a part of, to be one of the guys, to be able to dance at the dances and feel normal, to sing on stage and be relaxed. And I did that early on through my junior high school years, and I never considered it to be a problem then. And the thing about alcoholism and addiction is that it is progressive. Once you take that first drink, or once I took that first drink, that's, I think, when I started. That's when the disease, because that's what it is. It's a disease. And for me, that's when the disease started. Now, I will say this. I do believe that I was born an alcoholic. I think it is hereditary. It's genetic. Both my grandparents on both sides, paternal and maternal fathers, were alcoholics. So I had several strikes against me once I was, when I was born. But to not belabor the point, your question was, when did I know that I had a problem? And I think as I went through those junior high and high school years, and even college, I didn't know that I had a problem with alcohol. I thought it was just normal to drink like that. When I knew that I had a problem was when your mom and I were married, and it really got out of control. I was drinking every night, and it began to culminate into just problems with our marriage, with functioning in my job, in relationships with other people, family members. And that's how, for me as a recovering alcoholic, when I know that alcohol is a problem is when it causes problems in my life.
Right, yeah.
So I would say probably about 5 to 7, 8 years into my first marriage is when I kind of sensed that I had a problem with it.
And would you react to that? Like when you first figured it out, like what was running through your mind when all that was happening, and how fast was it happening, and just what was your reaction? How were you feeling through all that?
I think for me, a lot of it was fear. A lot of my character defects were they presented themselves as a result of being fearful. And I drank to fill an empty void within myself. And there's only one way to fill that void for this recovering alcoholic, and that is spiritually, being spiritual, connecting with my God. I drank to numb my feelings, so that I didn't have to feel. And it caused a lot of problems in my life.
See, I want to kind of build on that. So you said that it caused a lot of problems. So how did you, being an addict, and how did it affect, the people around you? I mean, obviously I know it hurt a marriage a lot, and then like friends and family, how did it affect them?
I think, and I'll just start by saying that for you and your brother, unfortunately, I missed a lot of time in the early years when y'all were, let's see, probably when Sam was probably 4 and you were maybe 6, somewhere in there. I missed a lot of those years. Why did I miss a lot of those years? Because I was in rehab and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with y'all. Mm-hmm. And because too, alcoholism is a selfish disease.
Yeah.
It is extremely selfish. and it affected not only, I think, my relationship, well, not the relationship, because you and Sam and I have a great relationship, but as far as the time that I got to spend with y'all, it affected that. And then I will say, my parents, I think we became distant. They didn't understand the disease of alcoholism. They didn't understand that it was a disease. A lot of people don't realize that it's a disease and what it does, and the families that it breaks up, the deaths, the homicides, the suicides. And I'll tell you, I was suicidal. There were times when I just wanted to die. I didn't want to live the way I was living. And I lost a job as a result of drinking. It was a job that I had in the medical device industry in one of the premier medical companies in the world. I'd been with them for almost 10 years, and I gave it all away. And, it's a crippling, if that's a word, disease that takes a lot from people. It really does. So
How do you think people looked at you? Like, do you think people looked at you differently when you were going through all this?
Yeah, I think people were probably on the outside looking in. Were like, what's wrong with Mart? Why can't he get it together? Why can't he just stop?
Yeah.
Why can't he realize what he's doing to his family, to his friends, his kids? But see, what a lot of people don't understand, like I said, is that alcoholism is a disease, and it's a disease that centers right up here between the two ears. It's a disease that centers in the mind. And so, and for me, there's only one way of keeping it at bay, and that is to do the things that I've done now for almost 10 years. And so, did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. So back to when you were talking about, addiction and how you classify it as a disease. I was listening to a podcast the other day with this guy who he was heavy during the opioid epidemic. Do you remember when all that was going around?
Yeah.
And
yeah, hey Connor, it's still going on.
Yeah.
There's more than one epidemic going on in this country right now.
Yeah.
Drugs and alcohol happen to be probably ahead of COVID-19. But anyway, I'm listening. Sorry.
And he said that he also every addict can obviously classify addiction as a disease and do you think that it is a treatable disease and a treatable illness, or obviously for you, when you've been sober for like what, 8 years now?
It'll actually be 9 years in August.
Yeah. So do you think it's
by the grace of God?
Yeah. Do you think it's treatable, like, to people who went through what you did, but they never really see the light like you did? Do you think that there's still hope for people like that who need to be treated?
That's a great question, Connor. And there's always hope.
Yeah.
There is complete hope, not hopelessness. There's hope in recovery because I'm living proof. Now, your first part of your question is it treatable? or rather, let me rephrase it. Is there a cure?
Mhm.
And the answer is no. There is no cure for alcoholism. There's no cure for cancer. And so so think about it like this. What does the individual do when they have or have been struck with the disease of cancer, whether it be melanoma or whatever the type is? They take their medicine, their chemotherapy, their radiation, but there is no cure.
Mhm.
So, okay, so now let's talk about the disease of alcoholism. So, how do I address the disease of alcoholism? For me, yes, rehabs are important. Rehabs are important in that they help the still suffering dry out, for lack of a better term or statement. It protects them and protects others. They gain some insight of what recovery is about. But for this recovering alcoholic, the answer for me is in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where hope lies. It is a program, a design for living, that the 12 steps, which are, and this is what's crazy. And you may not know this, but Alcoholics Anonymous started back in 1935. That's when it all began, when two men came together and created this design for living. To answer your, I know this is long-winded, but you said, is there hope? There are millions and millions of recovering alcoholics throughout this country and this world that we live in, and that have been through hell and back, and have recovered. And they have recovered because they worked the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll take a sip with you of water, that is.
So, talking about like the millions of addicts, what would your advice, obviously not everyone's going to be able to hear this, but what would your advice be to all the addicts out there right now that are just continuing to fighting this really bad disease?
Wow, that's a good one. What would well, I was always told that, or my sponsor used to tell me, it's important for you to share your experience, strength, and hope with others. And I find that, the best thing I can do is, first and foremost, stay sober and set an example for you and your brother, and to be an example for those who are struggling. And for me to share my story is, I think that's what God's purpose, or that's what God's will is for me, is to help those that are still struggling. And they're really, I know people that have lived under bridges. I know people that have committed murders and various other crimes, and they got sober. And I just encourage people. I try to be an example, try to share my my experience, strength, and hope. But here's the thing, you know, I heard a song the other day, a country song. It said something to the effect of, you know, you can lead a horse, to water, but you can't make him drink.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. It's a wonderful analogy, and it's true with alcoholism and addiction. The individual has to realize that they've got to do this for themselves, or for him or herself. It's not for anyone else. It's for, when me getting sober is for me. And if I work on my recovery of staying sober, then everything else around that just falls right into place.
So back to what earlier, so like the early years of you, or like just through the longevity of you drinking, what do you think was the lowest point you ever like experienced from yourself and from within, or whatever?
And you're saying when I was younger,
Or just just throughout you being an addict, or lowest point?
okay, no, that's a great question. I can tell you that for me, and this is just for me, it's different for everybody. Probably the most difficult thing that I've ever been through is the demise of my first marriage. That's probably the most difficult thing I've ever been through. And getting sober is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, because it really is a simple program. Okay. It's not hard. It's a simple program for complicated people. So I would say that was my low point. I can tell you right now, my low point was when I was out at Whitfield, mm-hmm. in the male receiving, which is the psych ward. That was probably my lowest point in the 48 years I've lived on this earth.
And what was that experience like, being in there?
I was there for a couple of months. I spent some time in the like I alluded to the male receiving, which is where it's an intake unit for patients that come in that are unstable. A lot of them mentally, physically, they have all various types of problems, issues. So they try to get their meds squared away. And then as I spent some time there, I was then transferred to what they call Building 84, which is the drug and alcohol recovery unit. And I spent some time there. And the thing is, they only let you out once or twice a day. I mean, you were literally, it's not like you were in jail, but you were confined. I mean, you weren't going anywhere.
Were you confined?
You were a slave, so to speak.
Yeah. Were you confined?
Wait, say that again?
Were you confined to like one certain room that you just stayed in like all day?
Well, building 84, and I tell you, it's crazy because I still go back and I speak and I share my story. And it brings back a lot of memories. But Building 84 is it's 2 stories, and it's almost kind of like a dorm room.
Mm-hmm.
Think of a dorm room, and it's just concrete, and then there's some offices and a couple of a little small cafeteria. But I mean, no. To answer your question, you're not confined to a room, or you're not in a padded room, but you're in there, and you're not going anywhere. They do let you out a couple of times a day. But it's not fun.
Yeah.
It sucked.
Mm-hmm.
That was my low point, for sure.
And so one thing I was very curious about is, like I thought I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and he was talking about how mental illness can sometimes feed its way into the addiction process. Like, do you think that you ever were suffering from some sort of mental illness while you were going through all this?
I don't know if I was necessarily. I mean, I was never diagnosed as schizophrenic,
Right.
like my roommate was, and when I first went into Whitfield. I mean, I was not schizophrenic, or I was not. There was no label. I mean, I was an alcoholic, that had been broken and torn down. And so, no, I don't think I was suffering from mental illness. But on the flip side, as I sit here and share this with you, and I mean, alcoholism and addiction, it's a mental illness. I mean, that along with being a disease, because like I said, it originates in the mind. It's a disease of the mind.
So when you were first becoming, and before you were admitted to your first, and about how many treatment centers did you go to?
Too many.
Too many. What's the furthest you had to go to one?
Geographically speaking? So, are you saying like location wise? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you saying the location?
Yeah, like I know you went to a lot of places here. Did you ever go like out of state or something like that?
Yes. One of my very first facilities that I went to was out in Wickenburg, Arizona, to a place called the Meadows. Wickenburg, Arizona. It's about 75 miles outside of what's it called? What's the capital? Or I don't know. Arizona, though. I was out there. Spent some time out there. I went to the Outer Banks, not the show, but it was the Outer Banks, and it was place in right there by the beach. Actually, it was on the beach. And then, of course, yes, I did spend some time at Whitfield here, and then Harbor House. So yeah.
And when did you think your parents, me and Big Daddy, started to notice that something was going on with you and all the drinking and stuff? And falling into that, was there ever like an open conversation between the three of y'all, or with Misty and Malie, and all of y'all just sat down and talked about it?
Oh yeah, we had many conversations, for sure. I remember being in Rosemary Beach. Y'all were probably about 6, 7 years old. And I can remember getting on one of the bikes and taking off down you pull out of the house and you come around that turn. And I remember falling off the bike and scraping up my knee. And I remember coming back inside and my dad saying, Mart, you got to do something. I remember him saying, Mart, you got to stop drinking. You're drinking too much. You're drinking too much. But like I said, what they don't understand is it's up here too. It's not just, yes, the physical part of it was a problem, but also up here. But yeah, I mean, I remember that clearly. And I can just remember I also can recall being in Harbor House and my mom, I remember calling my mom. I remember where I was. And she said, Mart, you realize you can't ever drink again. And see, that's the problem that a lot of people, they don't understand. It's not about not drinking ever again. It's about not drinking for this recovering alcoholic today. It's living one day at a time. And it's trite and it's said all the time, but it's a program of one day at a time. And for those that are early on in this, sometimes it's 1 hour at a time or 30 minutes at a time. So yeah, I mean, we had that discussion. We've had various discussions. I know when I was out in Arizona, Misty and Malie and mom and dad, all four came and we had a family week. And a lot of this was shared with them so that they could understand what was going on. Bringing back memories, lots of memories.
And do you think, I know that growing up, you told me that you didn't have the strongest relationship with your dad, but do you think also you becoming an addict also, do you think any of that had to play in y'all's relationship?
Question. I think that my father and I had a very tumultuous relationship early on due to the fact that he was not present in my years of growing up. He was, I say not present, I mean physically he was there, but I think it's more emotional.
Mm-hmm.
He was not emotionally present.
Right.
Physically, he was there, but a lot of times, he was, I mean, my dad was a wonderful man. He was a gifted cardiovascular surgeon that saved countless lives. And I hear stories to this day of lives that he saved. I heard one just the other night at a prep baseball game. But I think my father didn't know how to emotionally get in touch with his soul, to feel his feelings. Connor, I never saw your grandfather cry. Never. I never saw your grandfather cry.
I don't think I ever did either.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's I mean, I could see him. I saw him from time to time, maybe tear up, but I remember my dad trying to hold it back and hold it in, and he would try not to show his emotions in front of me. And I think that in itself was a problem. Fast forward to the last 10 years. It's been very pleasant. He retired from private practice in 2005 and then went to work at the university, and actually went by and saw him, and we would talk and have discussions on that, you know, about medicine and what was going on and surgery and this and that. And so the good thing is I can say this, that when my father passed away, actually it's almost been a year.
Oh yeah, we'll be on the
February 23rd. Isn't it the 23rd of February last year? When my father passed away, I was sober.
Mm-hmm.
And he died knowing that his son was sober.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And that's got God's fingerprints all over it.
Yeah.
All over it.
Because when something like that happens, like a loss, a lot of people usually will take a substance or something just to cope with that. And somebody like you who, you know, temptation plays, you know, obviously temptation plays a really big part of, you know, the addiction process. And then then after, you know, once you're sober, you know, it can be very, you know, it can be tempted, especially, you know, all your friends and how a lot of them still, you know, that you went to high school with, a lot of them still drink, but you still talk with them, but you know, you had to sacrifice not seeing them as much because you couldn't be around them because you knew that you had to stay sober.
Yeah. You know, when you get sober, they tell you that there's only one thing you got to change, and that's everything. And you really do. I mean, I don't hang out with the people I used to hang out with. Not that they're bad people. They're not bad people. I just choose to hang out, or I don't really hang out with friends. I mean, I have lots of friends, but for me, I do spend a lot of time with people that are in recovery, because they are people that are a lot like me.
Mm-hmm.
And we fellowship, we share stories with each other, but probably the most important thing is that we carry the message to those that are still suffering. And that's what the program is all about, is helping others.
And now that it'll be 9 years in August, how big of a part do you play in all your meetings? Are you just like a normal guy who just sits in and listens, or now do you, you know, speak and, you know, talk to other people?
You know, in AA, we're all the same. And it doesn't matter if you've got a year, if you've got 30 years. We're all one drink away.
Mm-hmm.
and nobody is better than anybody. There are no presidents. There are no vice presidents. There are no leaders. They're just people that are in recovery that talk about the solution to life's problems. And it is ingrained in me. I do chair meetings, which it's not so much as being a leader, you're just facilitating the meeting. You're the facilitator, and you go through everything in the meeting and call on people and come up with topics. You know, we in AA we do talk about the problem, but immediately after we talk about the problem, we talk about the solution, because that is, it's good to know what the problem is, but we've got to have a solution. So, but there are no leaders in AA. We're all the same.
And would you still classify yourself as an addict today?
Yes. There's that funny commercial. I won't name the name, but it's a recovery place facility out in California, and the guy comes on there and he says, I'm so and so, and I used to be an addict, but I'm not anymore. And every time I hear that, I cringe and then I laugh, or maybe I laugh and then I cringe. Yeah, that's it. I laugh and then I cringe, because once an alcoholic and an addict, always an alcoholic and an addict. I mean, that's just, you never get rid of the disease. You just don't. You can keep it at bay. You can mitigate your character defects. But the disease is always there. Always.
Well, Dad, thank you for coming on and telling me your story. I'm sure that once I get this uploaded, everybody will be very happy to hear it.
Well, I've enjoyed speaking with you, Connor, and you know, if there's ever anybody out there that needs help or just wants to talk, my line is always open, and my door is always open. And there's one thing that I always say in Alcoholics Anonymous, or that we always say, and that is that God could and would if he were salt.
All right. Thank you.